evening, everybody. Just as everybody is joining us, just bear with us 1 second. Great. So, I'm Hannah Randall, and I'm the head of learning here at Holocaust Centre North. And tonight I am joined by our head of research, Chelsea Sambles. And Chelsea will lead our Q&A at the end of tonight's presentation. Tonight, we are joined by our two speakers, Yifat, who is the daughter of Thomas Geve, a Holocaust survivor, and Charlie. A few technical things to mention before we get going. Chelsea and I will be monitoring the chat box, so feel free to put any questions in there, and we will try to make sure we get to as many as possible. The talk will be around 45 minutes, and then we'll have around 15 minutes at the end for questions and discussion. And we will aim to end around 6 p.m. Tonight's event is recorded, and tomorrow you will receive a link for the recording as well as a short online survey. So any feedback you can give, we would be most appreciative of. Before I pass over to Yifat and Charlie, I'd like to introduce them properly. So Yifat is the daughter of Thomas Geve, as I said, a Holocaust survivor, and his book, The Boy Who Drew Auschwitz, is what we are here to learn more about this evening. Yifat has become her father's helper and partner in presenting his testimony to new audience around the world over the past decade. Unfortunately, Thomas is unable to join us personally tonight, but Yifat will be using some snippets of recent recordings that were taken of Thomas to make sure his voice is still part of this event. Charlie has worked alongside Yifat and Thomas to create the book using his skills as a journalist. Tonight we will hear about how the book came to be and Charlie's journey from a sports journalist to an author, and how they tackled lockdowns and being based on different sides of the world to bring The Boy Who Drew Auschwitz to being. But without further ado, I would like to pass over to Yifat. Yifat, if you'd like to share your screen when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Very excited to be here. I would say special times in Israel right now, very relevant to what our work for those years, and perhaps we could talk about that afterwards in the second part. But this part I would like to dedicate. We have kind of an introduction, I would say, of my father's works as a Holocaust survivor who became a witness, and he created a special testimony, which I will take you now through this testimony, and hope to get the main points just to understand what this testimony is about, and hopefully you would get to read the book and see the drawings that are part of this testimony. And hopefully in the future, I'll be happy to perhaps have another meeting talking about the use of this testimony for education and research purposes that has been done for over 30 years now, 40 years. So I'll share the screen and we go through display, and that would hopefully help us all go through the story in the brief time we have now. Just wanna, sorry, technical challenge. Oh, no, it's the end, sorry. What changed since we did it before? Okay. Now it should be fine. Okay, can you see that? Can you? Oh, okay, great, thanks. Okay, the testimony of Thomas, the latest name of the testimony is The Boy Who Drew Auschwitz. That's the name of the latest version that Charlie became our partners of bringing out again to the world for the third time. And that's the name of our display today. And it's about Thomas written and drawn testimony of his life in Germany and through the Holocaust and camps. Okay, so I'll start with a bit of background. And Thomas was born in 1929 in Germany, in Stettin. It's up in North Germany. First child to his mother and father, Bertha and Erich Krohn. And he was raised in his first years in a liberal Jewish family in Germany, very educated, spent lots of time in nature, and the basic values of his character was built up in those years with his parents and two aunties. One of them is here, Auntie Ruth. One was a music teacher, so the whole part of arts and music and culture came from one aunt, and lots of other values and parts of his life came from the other aunt, who was part of his life a bit later. But in 1933, when the Nazi regime started and they came to government, life started to change for Thomas and his family. First step was that they had to move because his father was a doctor. He couldn't practice anymore in public places, so they had to move. Part of the new rules was that they had to move to his hometown, Boyton. That was a town on the border of Poland, and that also affected everything that I mentioned about Thomas' childhood was relevant later on to his character, to his way of coping with the future events, and also to his way of describing life afterwards and his testimony. So border of Poland gave him a bit of sense of the weather and culture of Poland that he would meet later on his life. Jews were forbidden to do many things. So as a child, he was more lonely, and he found his interest in lots of technical games and stuff. But he started to go to school, Jewish school. You see here the first day of school. And becoming a student in school also revealed a lot of his the meaning of being a Jew in German in those years. And he already started to understand also the values that he grew up on that was changing. You could see this through the books they had to read and the messages they got at school. He didn't like school very much. He was also a very curious boy, and he preferred to hang around. But the first year was still in school. And then future events started to happen, and they were very significant to change the direction of his life. So one event was in 1938, November, Kristallnacht. Many Jews understood that it's going to be tough. That was a very critical point. And many just made a very big effort to leave Germany. Also, Thomas' family, even before that, planned to leave. It was not easy to do that. It took a while. His father, as a doctor, actually got a visa to England, but Thomas and his mother, and also his mother, but Thomas didn't. So the family was planning to leave, and Thomas was sent to Berlin to join his grandparents, who moved there a bit earlier, and later on his mother joined as well. 1939, the family actually split, where Thomas and his mother was in Berlin, and his father flew to England. And the plan was that he will settle in England and draw out Thomas and his mother to join him. He left in August 39, and in September, the Second World War broke, and the borders were shut. So Thomas and his mother were actually stuck in Germany, could not leave. And they had a little bit of connection with the father, but after a while, the letters stopped coming, and they didn't know what happened with him, whether he lived or not. But Thomas kept his imagining and hoping that his father joined the British Army and is fighting for them. So that kept his spirit up. Thomas and his mother lived in Berlin for a few more years under the threat of being caught, lots of restrictions as Jews, and life became more and more dangerous. After the Jewish schools were shut down, the Jewish teenagers were, by the Jewish community, they offered them options, something to do. Thomas was volunteering, working in the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery in Weißensee. Not very suitable to a 12-year-old boy, but that also was actually significant to his abilities to survive later on. Here we see his last photo in Berlin with two of his friends in the cemetery. One of them, Werner Jakobson, he was the one who got this photo kept, and he survived, and he was not in camps for various reasons, but they reunite after the war, and he gave Thomas this last photo from Berlin. And they managed to survive quite a lot of time in Berlin, much after most Jews were there. And in one of the last trains leaving Berlin with the Jews of Berlin, Thomas and his mother were sent in June 43 to the east, not knowing where they're going. No one knew where the trains are going. They knew they're going to the east. And the voyage was from Berlin to, actually, the train went out, and it took a while. Thomas figured out by the signs from the little window they had in the train. Of course, it was not a passenger train, it was cattle train. The book talk about the voyage as well, quite detailed. And he figured out they're going to Poland. And then the train stopped and the doors opened, and they were actually entering the gates. They didn't know where they arrived, but the gates of Auschwitz. The story from now, the display would be done by, we will actually show the story through Thomas' own drawings. I'll talk more deeply afterwards how those drawings came to be. But just to give you a general picture of what happened from now, Thomas was living in Auschwitz and then Gross-Rosen and Buchenwald, 3 different concentration camp, death camps, for 22 months. He entered the camp of Auschwitz when he was 13, and he left the camps at the age of 15. This was not a typical age for, no one was in that age in camps. The camps were for grown-ups and teenagers from the age of 15 and above. So Thomas' story is quite unique, being in a camp in that age and surviving for so long, and 3 different camps. So the testimony now would be through his drawings that he actually done after liberation in Buchenwald. So here we see, with the time we have, I will go quite briefly through the drawings just to show you what kind of drawings he did, a little bit about them. So I have to go quite quickly through them, but if you will have questions, something very specifically, you can ask me. But otherwise, in the second part, when we have the question, I'll be happy to refer more details. But here, this one would just show us one of typical about Thomas' drawings, very unique drawings, is the accuracy. Thomas' character was a very accurate boy and grown up later, and his attention to detail was very special. And he really, once he drew those drawings, one of his goals in mind was to keep everything very accurate, because he wanted to show actually his parents what he went through. So here we see a drawing that he did actually 22 months after he saw the actual scenario, when he arrived to Auschwitz. And that's quite unique. And that time, in June 43, the train stopped outside of the gates. Later on, we know they went in, but then here we see the train goes in, but that was not when Thomas arrived. So that is the scenario he saw, that's what he drew, and this is how it actually looks like. So I chose to put a real photo of the gates of Birkenau. This is Birkenau, just as he saw it, how he memorized it so many months after. The first, the drawing of arrival. So the book actually talk a lot about those moments of trying to understand where they arrived to. But the gates of the doors of the train was open, and we see the scenario of arrival. And Thomas called this drawing he said that that's the saddest picture of history of mankind, because in this moment, human beings decide, sentenced to life or death in a wave of a finger, a fellow human beings. And what we see here, the procedure is that a group of people, can you see the arrow I'm kind of showing here? So the group of people arriving from the trains that are being separated on this selection are a group of women able to work women, group of men able to work men, and all the rest are in the middle. Elderly people, younger children, disabled people were sent to the middle. No one knew what it means, but they were marched in two groups. Thomas was sent to the men's group, and they were marched in the camp gate. Same with the women, and the rest was staying there, probably waiting for some kind of a ride, because they can't walk that easily. So that was a scenario. No one knew what that means at that point. Thomas is arriving to the camp of Birkenau, and he started a journey. He called it becoming a prisoner. And he shows us the process of becoming a prisoner. I'll be quite brief about it, so I managed to show you more, but this one is quite special, so I'm just going to a little bit talk about a civilian comes in, one person like everyone else did nothing wrong. He enters the camp. First thing, he's taken all his clothes off. And these, by the way, would be shipped back to Germany, to the population of Germany. Then the hair is cut off, and disinfection, with all sorts of material just to keep people disinfected, showers. Then they were given clothes, nothing fit, just what you get, you put on. And then came the procedure of the tattooing and registration. And then you go off out of there and you become a prisoner. And this procedure took few hours, and it took like big rooms. Many people were there. Thomas did some kind of like a little bit like a comic scenario, just showing in one page a whole process of changing people's life from one point to another and becoming prisoners. There are very special stories about that process specifically for Thomas. I just mentioned two. One was that once he got the tattoo on his arm, he was just a boy, he played with the numbers, and he added the numbers, and he figured out that the numbers added to be 13. And he said, I wonder if 13 would be my lucky number. And the second story was when he actually understood that there are only men around him, no young people. He felt like it's wrong, it's not his place. Thomas was used, the story before the book start with his life in Germany. And he used to be quite brave, and he used to see Nazi SS officers, and he saved himself and his mother a few times while living in Berlin. So he was quite brave, and he knew his way of talking to those people. And of course, he knew German, what was quite special in the camps. Not too many Germans were there at that point. So he went to one of the officers, and he kind of knocked his heels, and he went there and just asked to be moved to the right place. I said, I'm not in the right place, I'm just a boy. Please put me where the other children are. And that officer, the whole story is in the book, but he actually looked at Tom and said, where would you like to go? And said, I'd like to go to the children's camp. And he said, there's not such place. And one day you will thank me, I haven't sent you there. And he just pushed him back to the line and actually saves his life. And he doesn't tell anyone about Thomas' age. So here starts a journey of 22 months. Thomas' drawn testimony is very large and variety. There are over 80 drawings that he did about life in camps. Some of them would be maps. There are quite a lot of maps. I just showed one of them, Birkenau map. Here you see the map, and here you see what's in the map, an explanation. The book will have word explanation about what we see here, but this is the drawn testimony. Here's another map of sketch of Auschwitz I. Thomas was moving from Birkenau when he arrived a day after to Auschwitz I, the men camp. And he described the camp through the map and other scenarios of life. Thomas was joining a special project called the Bricklaying School for the teenagers, and they actually were taught the skill of building, so they can use their skills in the helping of building the camps and outside the camps and inside the camp. That fact actually saved his life in a few ways. But the teenagers had like an inner world inside the men's world. They had their own barrack, and they were taught a skill, so they were needed. And that was quite good for Thomas. And so he was a bit sheltered from the elderly people in a way, not completely. And being a bricklayer also meant that he could move around. Most prisoners were not allowed to do, they had a work job, a day job, and they did what they did and had to go back to the barrack. One of the things in the camp was that people would not know what's going on. Everything was kept hidden. But Thomas, in his role as a bricklayer, he changed a few different jobs, and he saw a lot. So that makes his testimony also quite unique, because he saw inside the camp and outside the camp what an average prisoner would not see. And so he could describe quite a lot of things. Here we see just another way of Thomas, like another kind of comic. He wanted to show the different things they did as bricklayers. And we see here, and you see the guards are like kind of rolling the wheel of life. Actually, their life are in the hands of their guards. The amazing story about here, I can't go in them, but hopefully if one day we have another chat, be happy to tell more stories about what we see in those scenarios. This is another kind of drawing. Thomas was very technical. He wanted to show a lot. I didn't mention, but these drawings are actually miniature drawings. He was drawing them on postcards the size of 15 on 80 on 10 centimeters, really miniature. And all those details are written, tiny little details on those postcards, but now we can see quite more. And this is a day routine of a prisoner, of a slave, a modern slave, 12 hours working day with 1 hour break in the middle. That was their life. And he says, you know, what they did in each hour in using the clock was quite special. This is another drawing I would like just to give a minute more than the others, because it's quite a unique one. Thomas drew a lot of scenarios from the daily life in the camps. One of them, were a very significant thing in life in camps, was the roll calls. In any weather, sometimes they were short, sometimes it took hours, especially if someone was missing. So he drew one of these, but for Thomas, that was an opportunity, because he wanted to draw the mass of people. There were thousands of people on those roll calls. But here we can see, even if it was a miniature drawing, look how each person in the roll call is a bit different. And Thomas said, years after, that when he drew those people, he didn't draw them automatically, you know, hats, shoes, and so on, like a line of people. He drew them individually. And he said, these were my friends. And although the camp life tried to illuminate their individual character, and they became numbers, for me, they were individual. They were human beings with names and history and character. And once he drew them, he wanted to give them back their characters and individual life. So he drew them differently. And that was one way of him, through his drawing, kind of win the battle of keeping his human figure, his friends' human figures, and even most of them perished. He gave them their life, and he's very proud of that, because for years till nowadays, when he showed them, he said, my friends are still alive through my drawings. And I think that's really special. Here we see, though, some of the drawings are actually Thomas listed loads of information. Here we see groups of working groups, different camps. No, working place, sorry. This is a working place. How many people worked in each unit, and what were the men and women, what they did, where did they work? Lots of information. Here we see different roles in the camp. Each role had a different armband, and Thomas drew the different roles. And of course, there are lots of stories behind that, just to show the historical information that kept in those drawings. One of the things the prison had to face was disease and vermins. Thomas spent a lot of explanation about that, and he said, bearing the punishment and the life and the things in camp, if you were a strong person, you could do it. But if you got those diseases, those little vermins that could actually finish your life, you could not do much about it. But they did try to do much about it and take care of themselves, and they did. Thomas had to face that as well, and it's written in the book. This is another unique, special drawings. This is actually a tablet comparing the food. The amount of food was very monotonic. It was quite a daily routine, what they ate. They actually had one main meal, and Thomas compared what they ate in Auschwitz comparing to what they ate in Buchenwald in a weekly set. And we see it was bread, soup, a bit of margarine or a bit of jam, or once or twice a week they had a little bit of sausage, and that what they had to live with. And of course it was not enough, and Thomas spent quite a lot of his drawings and his written testimony talking about how they helped themselves to gain extra food. Here he drew the way they cooked and the way they split the food through there were working groups. They had to split to thousands and tens of thousands of people in Auschwitz how they split the food in various ways. This is how they cope with hunger. So hunger drove them to eat things that were not usually being eaten normally, but they helped them to survive, like peels of vegetables, horseradish, rotten food, and such things. By the way, here Thomas drew the kitchen, that they tried to steal food from the kitchen garbage. This building's still there, still exists in Auschwitz, so it's still there, and that's to be shown. Another special thing that Thomas did in his drawing, Thomas was, as I mentioned before, his aunt was a musician. So Thomas loved the music world since he was a child, and in the camp, he was drawn to anything that was connected to music. So one known thing was the orchestra. He wrote quite a few things about that and how it affected him and other prisoners, but also the songs. Songs had a very significant role in their life, and that written quite a lot in the book. But one of the things Thomas did, he wrote the lyrics of songs just after liberation. He shared that with his inmates, other inmates who were liberated, and he wrote quite a lot of lyrics of songs, which otherwise I don't know if they would survive, because they were sang by the prisoners. They were not written anywhere. And he wrote them, also including a song from the women's camp that a comrade told him about. So that's another thing he paid attention to. This is a drawing that shows it was just a boy. He was just a boy, and he put his life in Auschwitz in alphabet, or the main words that accompanied his life as an Auschwitzer. So we see the block and the number and the capo and the fence and other appel and other words. By the way, this is one of the drawings. Many of them are very, how we say, when we work with teenagers, with young audience, with students, these drawings are very powerful. We do things with them, like they do their own alphabet in their own life, and we compare to Thomas' life and other things. And educational matters, Thomas' drawings are very special to work with younger audiences. This is a day of when they left Auschwitz to the march. I'm just looking at time. I'll be quick now. Thomas drew the death march after evacuating Auschwitz. He was taken to the death march for about 2 days, or about 60 kilometers, marching barely alive by that point, very skeleton people, walking with hardly any food. And that's a day when they left. We see a whole scenario of what happened. There are lots of details here following what happened that day. Also, the death march itself, in the book, Thomas relate to that, what happened there, how they did it, how they managed to do this unbelievable march, and even helping each other. We see people helping each other in the join. Thomas described in the book how all the way along through, because he was quite younger, people were leaning at him, relying on him to help them. It's just unbelievable stories coming from those parts of the story as well. They were sent for a short time to a camp called Crossroads, and was very dangerous camp, very low survivor percentage. That was really, really bad. And he was lucky not to be there too long and managed to survive the harsh times there. And again, they were taken out later on, evacuated again, ending up arriving, not knowing exactly the date, but around January, arriving to Buchenwald. Buchenwald was a different kind of camp from Auschwitz. Thomas talked of the differences. And here he shows us there was a camp police held by the prisoners. There were lots of political prisoners in Buchenwald, and they had a very strong underground. And Thomas talked a lot about the underground, and it's quite unique. There are not too many stories about the life of the underground, what they did, and Thomas described a lot of that. One of the things was they were guarding them at night, actually saving their life from other prisoners. Thomas, that's the drawing of liberation. The story of liberation of Buchenwald is very special. We got too familiar with a guy who worked with Thomas' drawings as well. He wrote a whole book just about the day of liberation. So many things happened there, so many different divisions, different scenarios. Every person who was liberated from Buchenwald will tell you a little bit of different story, because there were different angles to the story. But Thomas shows his angle, and there's so many things happening in this drawing, including the Allies arriving. But actually, Thomas, where he was, it was a self-liberation. The prisoners liberated themselves, and the Americans arrived a bit after. But the book described in more details that scenario that day. After liberation, the Americans arrived, and they started to take photos of everything to make sure the world would know what they found when they opened. They could not believe what they see. And they got people to film and show what happened. And they got people coming from around the world and from Germany to see. Delegation came over to see the atrocities they found in the camp. And Thomas says, I'm proud that I was actually like one of those liberators, or one of those who took the films, because I drew in colors. They had black and white cameras. I did it in colors, and that was my part of showing what happened. This is the roll call of nation after liberation. Thomas was, in the last few months, couple of months, he was sent to the youth or the children's block 66. Lots of stories about this book. I think a block, and I think a book just came a few years ago about the book. You can't see Thomas. I'm really looking to find one day, hopefully, a photo of him. I'm sure there's somewhere. I couldn't find yet, but I did find a photo of his inmates, and these were teenagers, just like Thomas. He was not well at liberation. He couldn't walk, very weak after 22 months in malnutrition and all the suffering he went through. But even though he did not give up and he couldn't walk, so he sat down he was later on moved after liberation to block 29. They split the people by their languages so they can speak. One of the things in the camp it was like Babylon. People could not communicate. There was so many languages in the camp, over 50 nations. But after liberation, the Americans split them by languages, which helped them a bit. So Thomas was placed in the German speakers. He was the only German and only Jew and the youngest. Most of them were not, maybe a few more Germans, but most of them were Hungarians and others. Sitting in that block was also some historians and people from the underground who actually physically collected information from the abandoned headquarters of the Nazis. So lots of information was gathered in this room. There was one table. Thomas was sitting on that table and he decided to start to draw. He got those postcards from the headquarters and some bits and pieces of pencils. He started to draw over 80 sketches and drawings of life in the camp, monuments, as I said, lyrics, songs, lists, and so on, as you saw. Here's Thomas telling us a short video about his decision to draw.
After liberation, I sent for another months. I gathered over 85 drawings for my father who lived in England, and I wanted to know exactly what happened in these drawings. Then I also started putting these drawings to word, to write books, because I was sure that the world should know what happened to the young people who grew up in the camps, and nobody else had come forward to do so. And I felt that I could do so and give all the details how people survived in the camps by helping each other and hoping for a better future. After liberation, I sat for another 2 months in Buchenwald in the hut, and I drew in color over 85 drawings for my father who lived in England, and I wanted to know exactly what happened in these drawings. Then I also started putting these drawings to word.
Sorry, sorry. I did the same one again, right? That's the next, sorry. Why? Okay, I missed something. Okay.
Your question was if there are things that left out on purpose from my books. That's very true, because I didn't, like other people, wanted to write a report of atrocities, of how people got killed and where they got killed and what people got killed. All this is completely out of my book because I wanted people to read the book and how people lived. And my book is completely how people lived and not how they get killed. There are plenty books about that, and that has nothing to do with the story of hope and survival. That is completely
out. Okay, so I'll be brief here. After liberation, Thomas was sent to recovery to Switzerland. After 2 months, he was in Buchenwald drawing those drawings in recovery. He was sent to Switzerland for 6 months for recovery with other youngsters. And there in Zuckerberg, Charlie would say a word about that. And in his 16th birthday, one of the best present was that the Red Cross helped him to find his father. His father was living in England all those times, joining the Navy as a doctor and helping. And they found each other. And in November 45, Thomas flew for the first time in his life. And he went to England, reuniting with his father. It was a whole story. That would not be in the first book. That Thomas wrote 3 books, actually. And the second book talks about life after liberation. So since 46 and on to the year of 50, Thomas was in London with his father, and he gained his education, and he went to college and became a building engineer. So the work in the camps, his life in the camps went on being an engineer. And in the year 50, he got a very special present in his life. His father remarried because his mother perished in the Holocaust. She did not survive the camps. And he remarried, and Thomas got a baby sister, Judith. He became a big brother, and he said to his father, "You're not alone now, and I have to keep on my duties, and I'm gonna join the new Jewish country in Israel, and I'm gonna be a soldier." He was supposed to be recruited to the English army, and he said, "If I'm gonna be a soldier and an officer, I'm gonna do that in the Jewish army in Israel." So just want to mention from that time on, for about 9 years, Thomas started also to write down his testimony. So this testimony is unique also by the authenticity that it was written freshly on when he was still young. All the memories were still there. He remembered complete discussions, and all the information was still fresh in his mind when he drew. Charlie, I think we have to skip. We wanted to read you some quotes, but I think time would not allow that. So you have to read the book and see Thomas' special language and perspective as a teenager that is shown very specially in the book. So he came to Israel, he became an engineer, he helped building Israel, he became an officer in the army, he fought all of the wars of Israel, independence and so on. He married, he started a family in Israel, 3 kids, 9 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter, and the second is on her way soon. And that's his sister, Judith. After many years, he didn't speak about his event. He just drew and had the books published in 1958 for the first time. But in the 80s, he decided to become, and the whole story why, but he became an active witness, started to travel around the world with his drawings and books, talking especially to teenagers, but all sorts of audiences. For over 20 years, he went to Europe, especially to Europe, Germany. And there was an documentary film was done, Nothing But Life, by Wilhelm Rosing, and in many languages as well. And he became known mainly in Europe, but he went on doing his testimony up to COVID times in Israel. First book was published in 1958 by the name Youth in Chains. And then in 1987, for the first time, with just few drawings. And the latest version, that's the album that came in 1997, just the drawings themselves. But for the first time, that's thanks to Charlie, who became our partner, the book was came out for the 3rd edition, combining both drawn and written testimony. And that's the uniqueness of that testimony. And it came in various versions, over 8 languages, 2 more on the way now. And the latest version in England to be found in shops. It's that version, the paperback, The Boy Who Drew Auschwitz. Just let's Thomas' last videos.
People ask me, are you happy about the new book edition? Well, there is nothing happy about the past, but it's good that the 40 prisoners who helped me survive 2 difficult years of concentration camp, they have now become alive again in my books, and that is all over the world. People ask, to my new audiences, I thank you for taking an interest in my publications. People should read about the past. People should remember about the past, and if possibly be active, being good, and build for a better future.
So much more to say, but we have to finish that part now. And I just want to say that Thomas is happy to connect with people, answer questions, and we give those talks more longer talks. But if anyone is interested, that's Thomas' email, thomasgeve@gmail.com. The website is being rebuilt. So if there's one, the older one is still there, but with the new one with more information, and you're more than welcome to connect, and we're happy to share everything, especially for education matters. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll let Charlie speak now, and we're happy to answer any questions, Kim. Thank you so much, and thank you, Hannah and Chelsea, for this opportunity to do it through your work. Thank you for your work, special work as well.
Thanks, Yifat. Fascinating as always. I just reiterate what Yifat just said, which is a big thank you to Hannah and the team at Holocaust Centre North for hosting today and giving us the chance to talk. I'm just going to spend a couple of moments talking a little bit about the book, behind the book, specifically, how did it come to be? What was my role in it? And I guess why? Why did I get involved? Why did we, as a team, want to bring it to today's audiences? And I should start, I think Hannah very kindly said that I was a journalist at the top of sorts. I'm a sports journalist living in America, writing about sports, rugby and cricket, which, as you can imagine, is slightly different for an American audience. But I was lucky enough to stumble upon what I felt was a remarkable story and just to run with it. And it's a huge privilege 4 years on into this project to see where we're at. So I'm gonna crack in. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I'm not going to show you too much, but I have a couple of illustrations which I wanted to show you. And I should start really in March 2019. This is where my involvement started. And I lived with my family in Zug, a tiny little expat town just outside of Zurich in Switzerland. And it was here where a client of mine at the time, Natalie, gave me this leaflet, which I hope you see on my screen. And this leaflet was called The Children of Buchenwald. And I was naturally, it piqued my interest, World War II history, but also a notorious event like the Holocaust. And what was Switzerland's involvement, or dare I say, lack of involvement? And as we tend to do, we go on to Mr. and Mrs. Google and we do our research on Google. And this is where I put the name Thomas Geve. I first came across this name in this leaflet. And this is where the context, and this is where Yifat talked just a few moments ago about it, which was the connection with Zug, which is where I lived at the time. And it was fascinating to learn and read about Thomas alongside youngsters, teenagers, young boys and girls who had been liberated from Buchenwald, were sent over to two locations in Switzerland. One was the Zuckerberg and one was Engelberg, which is now a ski resort just outside of Lucerne. And it was here where Thomas and his fellow youngsters started that long road back to some kind of recovery. And I'll just show you a couple of drawings, sorry, not drawings, photographs, just to bring a bit of context to this and how I got involved. So the Zuckerberg where Thomas was, this is in 1945, and it was called the Felsenegg Home, and the Felsenegg Youth Home to be exact. And it was here where Thomas, the amazing alpine surroundings, I lived there for a fair few years, so I understood what it was about, but absolutely stunning place. And today now, and this is my final illustration, this is what it looks like now. And it's now a private school, amazing views overlooking Zug. What's nice for us and the family, I guess, is that the Montana Institute, as it's known now, hosted Yifat on January 27th, I think it was last year or the year before, to recognize International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So to be able to fill that gap of 75 years or so from when Thomas arrived to the current day. So that's just a little bit about the context. So far as the history, I'll run through this very quickly because of time, but thanks to Google, I found Thomas's website, which Yifat just alluded to a few moments ago. I wrote a really bad email, sort of mumbling about how I was a journalist and the Zug connection. Yifat, bless her, decided to pick this email up and we started talking. I think literally a few hours on from the email I sent. I got to learn about Thomas's story, about his journey, not just when he entered the world of Nazi concentration camps, but also beforehand, his life up until those 22 months that Yifat spoke about. And I read Guns and Barbed Wire, which was his second book. Fascinated, compelling, so much fact, so much information, so many people he mentions, so many places, so many events that he went through. And Yifat and I, said to me that they would love to update the testimony, and particularly whilst Thomas was still with us. And we thought, well, let's run with it. Let's see what we can do. That took me to Auschwitz for the first time, which was an extraordinarily humbling experience. I saw copies of Thomas's drawings there, more determined than ever to go, right, who do I know in my network? And I'd perhaps give a very quick interlude, if there are any teachers or possibly students listening in here, the importance of having a network and maintaining a network, building a network, because I found a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in about 15 or 16 years, had a coffee with him in London, and he was a non-fiction manager at HarperCollins in London. HarperCollins, I think, is still the second largest publisher in the world. It snowballed from there. Bravado came out, I think, saying, yes, I know how to do a book proposal. I had no idea how to do a book proposal. But we had that wonderful news towards the end of 2019 that HarperCollins were going to commission it. And then Yifat and I started writing and working together just as the first COVID curtain came down in March 2020. So just a very quick run of events of, the book behind the book. What was my role in this? Look, I think upon reflection, more of an editorial role, because Guns and Barbed Wire, we had Thomas's words, we had the story, we had the chronological order of events. We didn't want to change that. What we wanted to do is to, make it a slightly more user-friendly experience for readers today because of how much information there was. And that meant adding more chapters, allowing the reader a chance to breathe, to take stock and then go on to the next story. So that was one of the key parts to this, was to add in more chapters. Another side was to provide more context, more references. So not just from a text perspective, but from an illustrative perspective. And that meant adding footnotes, trying to give a little bit more context around places, times, dates, people that Thomas talked about in his story. I think absolutely key, and I'm sure Yifat would agree here, is the drawings, to be able to put much more drawings into this book and not just put them all in one section in the middle of a book, but actually to be able to use that old expression of the drawings tell the story tells the drawings. So to actually put these pictures alongside the context of these pictures, which I think was very, very important. So from a personal perspective, what was a real privilege for me, and I'm sure Yifat would agree from her perspective, would be to add a little bit more new material. So through the interviews that we did with Thomas in person, I went out in July 2019 to interview Thomas and meet the family. That was fantastic and wonderful to be able to put new material into this latest edition, updated testimony, The Boy Who Drew Auschwitz. Very quickly, I'm going to go on to why did I get involved? I think there are probably many reasons why I got involved, but there's a personal perspective here. My grandfather was a Far East prisoner of war to the Japanese, 1942, 1945. And I guess we knew very little as a family about my grandfather's journey. There were certain similarities to Thomas from the fact that he made it through. But we really had so many gaps. We didn't know at all really what his journey was. And I guess that history side was something which I felt that was missing, not just from my perspective, but from my family's perspective. So coming across Thomas's story in such random circumstances perhaps gave me that chance to open history up again, keep history alive, and having that privilege of not just having a story, this is Thomas's story, in text, but also to have it illustrated as well. We feel that's very unique, very biased perspective, but we feel it's unique. So I think there was a personal perspective. The other side, and what I will finish upon, is obviously in connection to Thomas. I found it compelling reading Guns and Barbed Wire. There's so much information in there. There are so many stories, there's so many events, there's so many people, times, places, dates. And yet one still has to pinch one itself to say, this is a 15-year-old who had the courage to draw these drawings, to bring back to life some of the most notorious events of what we understand the Holocaust to be about. And as Thomas mentioned in his videos just at the end there, I would actually slightly disagree with Thomas in an honourable way when he says, you know, to avoid the nastiness and the horrors of the Holocaust. I don't think he does actually ignore too much of it, but he does definitely concentrate on life, how they lived day to day, trying to find the positives in, you know, extraordinary conditions and circumstances and adversity. You know, from my side, I picked out, and I still do in some ways, you know, what Thomas talked about in terms of the importance of friendship, the importance of sharing, the importance of trust, the importance of looking out for each other. You know, he still managed to find a positive theme without ignoring what he went through, what so many others went through on a daily basis. So those are probably two, one a personal reflection, one more connected to Thomas, which I wanted to raise. And the way I would end it from my perspective, it's still, you know, a huge privilege to have played a tiny, tiny part in bringing this story out today. Thank you very much. Hannah, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Totally. Well, I as Chelsea will.
Sorry, Chelsea.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing both of your incredible discussions about this wonderful text and book. And I mean, from my perspective, as just a simple member of the audience, I find the drawings fascinating because of the detail. There's so many unique selling points, if you can call it like that, to Thomas's story, because it's so rare, as Yifat was saying, that such a young boy would survive for so long in 3 really terrible concentration camps. They're all terrible, but they were all especially so. And then, of course, as well, too, that Charles, that you came to this project and then sort of breathed a new kind of life into it. And you're an eloquent speaker and an excellent communicator. So I can see how that also helped reveal some of Thomas's stories. And by you having those fresh eyes on the text itself, I think that probably really helped to bring new insights, right? And maybe amplify or modify some of the stories so that there was this sort of fresh, you know, breath of air into Thomas's incredible and remarkable story. So, you know, I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions. I certainly have a few, but if anybody has any questions, please, by all means, put them into the chat. But one of the questions I wanted to ask, perhaps both of you, is did Thomas continue to draw in his adult life? Did he ever have an artistic passion, or was this simply for documentary sort of sake?
I think I'd pass that on to Yifat.
Yeah, no, he always says, you know, it's the first and last time I drew. It's not true that it was the first. As a child, he wanted to draw what he saw in Germany when all the bombings. He was fascinated, and he started to make sketches of what he saw. And his mother said to him, "You can't do that. People would think you're a spy." So he thought that's too dangerous. And the next time, actually in Auschwitz itself, he started to do sketches and maps. Of course, it was forbidden, he hid it, but he had to leave it back when he left Auschwitz. And then those drawings was his, you know, project of his life. And he haven't drawn since. I always told him, you know, you kept on being an artist because you were an engineer, and being a building engineer, you did your artistic part, but he never drew again after that. It was one thing.
And I can perhaps understand that to an extent, for sure. But pretty harrowing drawings. A follow-up to that would be, and maybe Charlie too, you can comment here, is that did Thomas gravitate towards one specific drawing, or did he talk about a specific drawing more than any others? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I mean, I had the privilege of sitting down with Thomas in July 2019, and you know, it's interesting. I had a script of about 12 pages long, and I don't think I used it once because I learned very quickly that Thomas often reverted back to his drawings. So the first part of that question is, you know, we talked a lot about his drawings, but not one specific one. I think we would talk about a subject and then almost straight away he would head to a drawing and then come out with information. So the drawings, and I think Yifat would agree here, you know, the drawings are probably where Thomas spends most of his commentary when he talks about his experiences in his life and his journey. You know, it's drawings is the reference rather than the story and the context, if you like. And I think what's really interesting is going forward now in 2023, you know, we're still learning facts, new facts about these drawings. So it's been a real privilege to start right at the not bottom, but right at the start, if you like, to try and understand some of these drawings. And obviously some of these drawings are quite well known, an important historical documentation. And yet, you know, 4 years later, we're still learning more. So yeah, not one specific drawing, quite a few.
One of the questions I've got too is where are the drawings now? Are they in Yad Vashem? Is that where they're?
Yeah, in 1985, Thomas decided to donate them to Yad Vashem, and luckily he did it, because they really had to work on them to preserve them, and they are kept in safe. Charlie and I just saw it when Charlie's visit. It was the first time I ever seen them, the originals, and it was really special event just to see them. They are kept in safe, in special boxes, keep the humidity and all that. And we wanted to make an exhibition. There was a request from New York, and they did not agree to take them out of those boxes. It's too risky. They used to be displayed in Yad Vashem, the originals, for a while, but then they thought it's too risky, it's too sensitive. So nowadays it's only duplications that are shown in Yad Vashem museum as well, but all the originals are kept, and we use duplications for the works.
And a very quick one. Sorry, Chelsea, just to add to that, you know, as a first time look at these photographs, Yifat alluded to in a conversation.
My next question is, Charlie, what did you think when you saw them?
Well, sorry to interrupt. I hope it's an interesting insight here. You know, Yifat alluded to the fact that they are the size of a postcard, and it's quite incredible when you see them up as a postcard. Just the devil in the detail. How much detail goes into the drawing? So, you know, that was one of the first viewpoints from my perspective, was just the extraordinary detail that goes into it. And you know, I won't go on too long, but one of the drawings that Yifat pulled up was the roll call.
Yes.
The fact that you can fit as many individuals onto that small space and give them each a separate identity, which is another part when you look at some of these drawings, you know, to actually properly look at them and see the detail. And, you know, I haven't stopped learning, really, to be perfectly honest, each time I look at the drawings.
Well, and that's just it. That's what struck me reading the book, is that the drawings themselves, the amount of detail. And I can only imagine if they really are 10 centimeters by 5. I mean, that's exceptional. But even if they were much larger, still the amount of detail on them is still exceptional, especially for a boy, like a teenage boy, to remember all of these things. So absolutely incredible. Thomas must be an incredible, have an incredible mind and an incredible attention to detail, right? Which I suppose makes him a great engineer.
Yeah. But also he's very proud, because he said, when I did those drawings, I didn't think of that. I just wanted to put as much as I can. And that's what I have. I had this little space. I wanted to put as much as I can, and I did it as tiny as I did. But he's so proud that he did not compromise on the quality of the information, because he never imagined that one day he will be in school and those figures will be huge screen on a huge wall. And every time it happened, he's so moved, and he's so proud of himself that he kept those details, so now people can see the real details. He wouldn't even imagine, especially when he drew the prisoners, and he keep on saying it. When I see that man that I drew so tiny little figure, and suddenly it's like 2 meters long on the wall, it's almost, you know, it's a person size, that he understood, like he really kept their character alive through his drawings. And he called them the little blue people who walk around with me telling the story of that generation.
Oh, Oh, thank you. It's incredible. His drawings have had a huge impact, which, you know, you can't say that about every child's drawings, right? So I appreciate that. Now, just a few comments that have come out of the chat that I want to share with you both, that we've had lots of people apologizing that they have to go, but that they're very thankful for you guys sharing your story and Thomas's story. Isabel says it's interesting and moving. Claire said this was a fascinating and moving presentation. Lots of people looking out for the book as they leave, which is of course exactly what we want. And yeah, I suppose it's probably time for us to wrap up the conversation for now, but you know, my huge thank you to you both for your time and effort coming today online, but nonetheless, and from so far away too, Israel.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say one sentence, please, that nowadays that this testimony is so relevant, and there's so much to draw out of this testimony for young people, inspiration. How do you deal with this, you know, when you have tough times, tough life? How do you keep on moving, living your life after atrocities? It's so relevant, unfortunately, up to this day. And of course, the whole matter of this regime and this you know, behaviors. And I do hope people would, we are happy to share the ideas of how to work with this testimony. It has been used for historical books and for education, and that's what we want it to be part of the education of the future.
Well,
keep the stories going, because we must keep this history. It's part of our present and future. Hopefully it would draw us for a better future. That's the hope of all survivors, that we will create a better future.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Yifat. One of my colleagues in the chat has said that she was, Imogen, has said that she was struck by Thomas's drawings when she saw them in the Shoah exhibition at Auschwitz I. So she was very delighted and incredible. It felt just very incredible to hear the story behind them today. So, and Toby as well would like to thank you on behalf of himself and Stefan Schulman. We found it very moving and fascinating. So without further ado, I'm going to thank you and close out the rest of the evening. Hannah is also going to share send out the recording for tonight's event, along with a short survey, everyone. So if you can help us complete that survey, that would be amazing. Hannah's just sharing it in the chat now, and make sure that we can ensure that these events are the best that they can be. And we have lots of other events coming up. For example, our next event draws also on the theme of children and war. On the 22nd of November, we have Dr. Lindsay Dodd, a former reader in history at the University of Huddersfield. She's going to be discussing her new book called Feeling Memory, Remembering Wartime Childhoods in France. I think Hannah's trying to share something on our screen right now, but I don't know if it's actually working, Hannah. This fascinating event is based upon 120 interviews and looks closely at the feelings of memories, which should be interesting. Ah, there we go, Hannah. So to find out about our events or anything else, please follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, or head to our website. Again, Hannah is going to share those fabulous links. So I would like to close by thanking our speakers, Charlie and Yifat. Really, thank you so much again for your time and for your enlightening discussions about Thomas's life. We are so very grateful for sharing your stories today, really, truly. And of course, for our audience for attending tonight. Yes, so everyone, thank you for your support. So without further ado,
thank you. Good night from Israel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night from Boston.
Yay, there we go. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Hannah, I must absolutely head, so I will sign off as well, okay? And I'll let you
go. I think they've both gone anyway. So.
Okay, we'll speak soon. Okay?
Bye.